Hello and welcome to the What's the Story podcast. I'm Jarlath Kyan.
And I'm Victoria Houston. Each week we'll be focusing on the stories that matter to you. Stories about the people and places that make Tyrone so special.
The What's the Story podcast is brought to you by the Northwest News Group, who also print our much-loved newspapers, the Ulster Herald, Strabane Chronicle and the Tyrone Herald. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the What's the Story podcast. I'm your host this week, Thomas Maher. This week our guest is Kat Brogan, one of the founders of Omagh Pride. She's an Omagh woman and she'll be telling us all about a little bit about her life as a poet and as an artist and some of the political activism she did in her younger years, as well as discussing some of the intricacies and some of the hard parts of organising such a large event like Omagh Pride. Omagh Pride is probably one of the largest rural prides in the whole of Ireland, so I hope you enjoy it, and this is Kat.
My name's Kat Brogan. I'm originally from Kilclahar, just outside Omagh, and I'm 40. This year I turned 40. I left Omagh at 18 to study in England, and I lived in London for a while. I lived in Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur, came back to Omagh in 2021, set up Omagh Pride with Lorraine Montague, and I'm now living just outside Derry.
Mm-hmm. And Kat, can we start off from the start? Tell me a little bit about what it was like to grow up in the sort of in West Tyrone and in the Omagh area in Kilclahar. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I'm a middle child, and definitely very much the middle child, loves attention, always looking for attention, likes to talk. I was always like that, always jumping and leaping about. Recently got diagnosed with ADHD, so that explains a lot. I was also dyslexic, which wasn't diagnosed when I was a kid either. So I always loved learning and was very curious and was very lucky to have parents who really indulged me and who parented me well. And having been a teacher and working in schools as a poet and as an educator, I think I really appreciate the security I had in my home, and also like the freedom to roam around. And we would always be playing down the Kilclahar burn and building huts, and I was born in 85, so it was kind of that spot before the internet really came along and before computer games were totally widespread. So I still had quite like a rural upbringing where you were really just left to your own devices and you all kind of played in big gangs. And my house was the kind of house that everybody was welcome in. So there would always be about 20 kids playing out the back in the slide and the swing and the tree house and the hut, and another 10 around the kitchen table making do, drawing, and then we'd be in the living room putting on plays. My dad used to actually borrow the video camera from work, and we'd be there doing wee videos and all. So it was definitely very sociable. And then as we got older, our house was kind of the party house. It was all back to Brogan's after the clock, as it was up above the clock. Shout out to the clock there, all the metalheads and everyone who liked their rock music, and we liked going up to gigs. And and I was involved in the feis. I used to do poetry in the feis, and I was really lucky. I had some great teachers who appreciated my spark, who encouraged me. Shout out to Mrs. Muhin in St. Mary's Primary School, and also to my, I had some great teachers in secondary school, wonderful history teacher, Mrs. Wilkinson, and my English teacher, Miss McChrystal, were really awesome. They really give me inspired in me a real love of history and politics and writing and performing and encouraged me. So I think I was really lucky in that way too. It was definitely difficult in certain ways of feeling that I was, very loud and exuberant, and I was bullied a lot as a kid. I think I was very easy to bully. So I definitely give them lots of ammunition, and was would stand up for myself, and I definitely wasn't somebody who blended into the background. So that was quite difficult. But I was lucky that I had, support and love and care in my home. Um, yeah, and a really smart sister and brother as well who helped me a lot with the things in school that I struggled with. I used to put the wrong shoe on the wrong foot, and then my sister, who was 2 years younger, would like tell me which shoe to put on which foot. So I think that's the thing about being dyslexic and being ADHD is like there's certain things you're very quick at and then certain things you're very slow at, and that can sort of confuse you and confuse the world as well. Yeah, so
Is that how you got into poetry, Kat? Is it through the fashions? Is that, or was that something that you were always into from when you were young? Because I've seen you perform as well, like a number of times now, and I know that that's part of your the thing you do. So is that how you originally get into it?
so my mom would always like recite bits of poetry. And my mom's actually disabled. She had a car accident when she was 20 and she had to relearn how to read and write and speak. And she's paralyzed on her right side. And I mean, I think having a disabled parent, especially disabled mother, is something that's like a real formative part of my identity because it does give you that you have to sort of grow up in a certain way, and be a bit more independent, I guess. And my mum couldn't drive, so there was no sort of like being lifted and laid. Like you were very much, I'd come back and there'd be a note saying like Catherine cooked the dinner, dinner spent was one in. And so it was but even though she really struggled with her speech, she would recite poems that she remembered off by heart. And when she did that, she was so fluent in her speech and she really remembered them. She would do W.F. Marshall, Charge of the Light Brigade, and she was an actress in amateur dramatics when she was growing up as her my granddad was also an actor as well. So I would really see her in this really fluent, magical way whenever she was reciting these poems. And then I got involved in the festival when I was really young, like 6 or whatever, and I used to win gold medals. And I'm quite a competitive person who enjoys exterior validation. So that was lovely. And I like a good clap. And then when I was in primary school, I used to write poems about being bullied, and then my teacher got me to go around the classes and say my poem. So I'll get your own back on my bullies, I suppose. And then um, in secondary school, I used to like write poems in like my friends' like birthday cards and stuff like that. And then as I went on the Ulster American, no, what was it called? The Ulster American Project,
Okay.
where they sent you to America so you could
Yeah.
like meet people from the same town who were of a different religion. Or AKA get a free trip to America when you were
Yeah.
15. And there was some out there, it was really interesting actually, because there was some friends who we were definitely queer, but like we didn't really know we were queer. And we used to write poems and we put it on this GeoCities website, and share poems with each other. And then I wrote a poem when I was leaving home for my mom to just kind of be like, mom, you did like I know it's been hard and but like you've done a good job and it's all right. It was kind of that sort of vibe. And my mom actually wrote a book about her recovery from her accident, and it was read at by occupational therapy
Okay.
students at Jordanstown. And she was actually a student of occupational therapy at Jordanstown when she had
Okay.
the accident. And my dad read out my poem for the students.
All right.
And that was kind of like in a way it was like my first audience of my own writing. And he said about how well I had gone down. So, and then when I was at uni, I used to swap poems with friends, and then I set up a poetry night, and then I used to MC to like hip hop, and I got together with some other people, and we bought some bass bins and a sound system, and we used to put on DJ nights and bring DJs up from London, and then I used to rap. So yeah, just kind of and then when I was in Belfast, I won the Belfast Poetry Cup and
Yeah.
did some workshops in schools, and I got paid £27.50 an hour
Oh,
for a
that's
workshop. A
that is
work. I
actually
mean,
not bad.
that's good
That's
rate.
actually
That's a
not
good
bad.
rate today.
Yeah,
Never
that's not
mind
bad at all.
never mind in 2008.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, maybe this is like a thing that I could do with my life, and really actually was a friend of mine who's Pakistani and kind of, from a sort of high class family over there. And she was like, you could like give this a go. And I was like, really? Could I? And it seemed like a mad thing why would I be allowed to do this as a career, as a profession or whatever? But it was the middle of the credit crunch and there was no jobs anyway. So it was like, might as well give it a bash. And I was squatting, I was eating from bins, I was riding a bike. So I didn't really need much money anyway. So yeah, then I got into it and then I got lucky. I got there was an American who was setting up this spoken word educator program with a link to an MA writer teacher at Goldsmiths in London. And I got sort of not like recommended for that. And then I got to do, this master's that was fully funded. I got like paid to do the master's, and then I got like a guaranteed poet in a school role where I was like 4 days a week working as a poet in a school, and that really gave me, financial stability for the first time while being a teaching artist, which was kind of amazing because I got to move out of the squat and live in a boat.
You lived in a boat? Was
I
that
lived on a boat
where was that? And was that in London or where was
in
that?
London.
In
In
London was
London, yeah, I was a constant cruiser, so I got a
yeah.
boat off eBay for £3,000
Okay.
and lived on that.
That's pretty
Um,
cool. Yeah. Did you ever go past
yeah.
David Gilmour's boat
I have no idea who David Gilmour.
from Pink Floyd? No.
No, no,
He lives in a
no.
boat. He lives in
I
a boat.
love Pink Floyd, but I could
Yeah.
not tell you a single member's name of Pink Floyd.
He lives
I
in a
did
big
not
boat
know.
in the middle of London. That's
There
why.
you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Fair
But-
play to him. He's not making enough money off them royalties
No,
anyway.
that's what it is. No, yeah. So, Kat, how did you end up? Uh, is that how did you end up in Malaysia then?
Oh God. You know what it's like, Thomas? It's always a woman. So I was presenting at a conference in New York as part
Okay.
of my spoken word educator program, and I went on Tinder and I met a Malaysian, and we had this whirlwind romance, and she came over to London and I went over to Kuala Lumpur, and then I was like, right, we're gonna have to be together. So I applied for some funding from the Arts Council of England to go to Malaysia. I find someone to take over my job as a poet in a school, and then she dumped me. And I
Okay.
was like, okay, so what am I going to do now? Like, I have this 5,000 from the British government to go to
Mhm.
Malaysia, and I've already found somebody else to take over my job.
Mhm.
And at that point, I was living in my friend's house, but then she decided to sell her flat. And I was just like, I cannot face
Mhm.
going back there again. I just was like,
Mhm.
I just cannot live in this kind of, so I was sort of done with London. I kind of had realized that I wasn't like rich enough for it,
It's
essentially.
expensive.
And I wasn't in the right career, and I
Yeah.
didn't have a rich partner, so I was or parents who were gonna buy me a flat in London. So it was
Yeah.
like, okay, this is not, I've done my stint, but it's so I was like, I'll just go to Asia and I'll spend a month in Kuala Lumpur and I'll do my project and I'll film my report, and then I'll go on and I'll just see what happens. I'd never been to Southeast Asia before, um, apart from visiting the ex. And then I got to Malaysia, and within 24 hours, I met my now wife.
That's
So,
that's amazing.
and I stayed for 5 years.
And
So,
what was
and it would probably still be there if it hadn't been for the pandemic, to be
yeah?
honest.
Did so you have a love for Malaysia then?
I did love it. We did some awesome things there. We set up a monthly LGBT cabaret event that was, consistently sold out, and we had amazing acts. We had drag queens, bands, comedians, spoken word artists, sometimes an activist. We had an open mic. Um, and it really, we we did like 45 shows
Wow.
from 2016 right the way up to the pandemic. And then in the pandemic, we did some really awesome online shows where we'd have like little ticker tape going along the bottom, and we'd bring people in, and we have like multiple cameras and all, and we really went for it, with all the online stuff. And we had a physical place, physical space with uh 1,500 square foot, with an event space, a sort of workshop space, the kitchen, all that office space. And we did workshops and events and like peer-to-peer mental health support group, book group, all sorts of things happening every month. And then we got when and it was all, volunteer and run on ticket sales
Yeah.
from the monthly event that we were having. And then when the pandemic happened, I mean, people were very generous and we kept it going for a while, but then we managed to get some funding um, from different international donors. And this is all while being completely underground.
Yeah,
So
because
it's
I know
illegal.
be gay in Malaysia, and I know. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah, so
To
it's
run something
it's
like that.
it's illegal to be gay. I mean, and then my partner's Muslim, and there's a kind of two-track legal system where if you're Muslim, you're not only subject to federal law, you're also subject to Sharia law. You can be caned, you can be fined, you can be imprisoned. And there's also a lot of stuff around like people feel like you can be bribed. People can put stuff on social media. There can be a lot of not just a lot of fear about what might happen, or family or retribution or what could happen in work, that kind of stuff, not necessarily just about is the law gonna prosecute me, but how this might affect, my family or your work or your career or whatever. And I mean, obviously, as like a white person, as a foreigner, I had so much privilege to be able to organize and do things out there. But then with my partner being Muslim, that was quite dangerous for her. And then also like everything had to be in her name because I wasn't allowed to do stuff out there, as a foreigner. I was doing all this while also being a teacher in a school because that was how I had my visa to be able to stay out there. Um, so yeah, like it was a constant stress bag. Like there was
Yeah.
always something kicking off, and there was always some kind of worry, and there was always something, like we used to do mad stuff. Like sometimes we'd have like once we printed out like this pop-up banner that was all like farewell cat, like so that we could have like a decoy that like the event was like a farewell party for this white lady, like
Yeah.
nothing to see here, So everything was totally like underground kind of thing. Like we had private Facebook, private Instagram, we had like a mailing list, and if you wanted to join, you had to like say who had told you about it, like answer
Okay.
these questions, and it was like a real secret society. It was like introducing someone to your dealer, it was like really kind of like really underground. And I mean, 5 years, 45 events, like a physical space. Like we never got busted, we never got raided, we never had special branch at our doors. So I think that was a real testament to like the community that we created, and how how much we tried to keep it safe, and how much other people kept us safe as well. There was definitely some moments where it was a bit touch and go. I mean, the thing was real, that was probably the biggest risk was maybe like somebody's parent looking at their phone
Yeah.
and then, reporting it or whatever. But we did have moms who came who loved it. We had this like
That's great.
80-year-old lady who used to come all the time. She loved it.
Oh no, that's great.
She'd be there with her wee Guinness and all. So it was tough times. It was really tough. I don't want to gloss over like how much stress it was, but in a way, like my experience of squatting and of doing activism work and sort of clandestine organizing, and was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is like this is normal for me. I'm used to this thing where, even way back to like the free party scene or whatever, where
Yeah.
it'd be like ring up a number or
Yeah.
send a text message, or, it was something that I'd already been schooled in, that didn't
Mhm.
feel too like alien to me.
You talked about activism before you went to Malaysia. What sort of stuff were you involved with then, Kat, before you went off? Were you always involved in political activism and things like that then?
Yeah, I mean, like one of my earliest memories is being like the same height as people's knees in a massive, you know, peace protest in Omagh. Like my parents were involved in the civil rights movement, and they would have, done marches and stuff like that back. My dad went to Queen's University in September 1969, so there was no getting away from it. And they'd always bring us up with stories about their political activism, and also their cross community work. Like they would have known people who are involved with Cormelia, and they would have done a lot of stuff like taking kids away, taking them on summer schemes, and the kind of stuff I'm doing at the moment,
Yeah.
like. And then I remember, I suppose, maybe the first thing I did, like as a sort of self-actualizing adult, was when the Iraq War started, which would have been, I think, 2003, when I was doing my A levels, and like we walked out of school,
Yeah.
went to the courthouse, stayed at the
Mhm.
courthouse, and we're like, yeah, we protest the Iraq war here. And then, when I was at uni, there was the Make Poverty History stuff. I went up to Edinburgh for that. Um, and I was like always really, I mean, I studied politics and English, and spent time out in Kenya, and was interested. I'd worked for the Fair Trade Foundation. So also whenever they were doing a lot of things around like with the credit crunch, and with like the banks and everything, and them all getting bailed out and things like that, and austerity. And then when I was squatting, they decided to ban squatting. So I was really involved in doing media spokesperson stuff around
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
So I guess because there was kind of a narrative in the press at the time that, like, oh, these squatters, they're all like, middle class soap dodgers who like don't want to work or whatever,
Mhm.
and they're like could go into your house and steal your house and all. So like, even though I am middle class, whenever you're over in England and you sound like me, then they don't, like, they don't
England,
understand.
yeah, I went to university in England. Being Northern Ireland middle class is very different from being English middle class.
Yeah,
So it
that's
is.
true. That's
Yeah.
true. So I just didn't sound like some kind of Southern softie that
Yeah.
that the English people could be angry with, I suppose. So they used to wheel me out to do a lot of media spoke stuff around that. So I was really, I was lucky to get trained by Greenpeace, and do a lot of, I mean, I did a lot of media. There was one day I did like 24 interviews in a day. Like
Oh, that'd be fun.
it started at 5:30 in the morning, like back to back with every regional BBC radio, and like ended with George Galway at like 11 o'clock at night. It was like insane. And then when Occupy happened, with Occupy London and Occupy Wall Street and all that, it was actually a journalist who was interviewing me about the squat and stuff, was like, "Oh, do you hear about this Occupy thing? It's happening. I want to interview you down there." And I was like, "All right, sure." And then we went down, and they'd already started kettling it, which is when they don't let people come in and out.
Yeah.
And they weren't letting anyone in, but because I was with this journalist, so they thought I was a journalist, so they let me in.
But yeah.
And then I started doing like what they call like human mic kind of stuff, where I have a very loud voice, so when people say something, and then you amplify it out around the crowd or whatever.
Okay.
So I started doing that, and then as I was leaving, they were interviewing somebody who I knew from Squat World, who I knew had a lot of mental health problems, and was maybe not the person who we wanted to be on the 10 o'clock news that evening to
Yeah.
talk about Occupy. And I went up to him and said, "Look, I can talk to you about it." And then the Occupy press team got in touch and were like, "Hey, can you do media spoke stuff for us?" And then on the when Occupy got evicted, I was squatting just around the corner, and our squat was kind of like, charge your phone. was like R&R for people who were
Yeah,
like living on a tent in the concrete in the winter.
yeah.
So I'd gone back to the squat because and then they'd evicted it and everybody's phones was dead and everybody was in the either in prison or either locked up or their phone was dead. So then they started ringing me like 5 in the morning, 5 Live ringing, da, 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 and I remember going down there with another poet, Pete the Temp, and it was just like a wall of film crews. And I just had to go down the line.
Yeah,
It was mad.
yeah,
It was totally mad. So yeah, it was yeah, and to be honest, like now looking back, that's like that was sort of 2011, 2012.
yeah.
It's so stressful, like especially when you're doing something like that. It's not a cure for cancer.
Hmm.
It's not fluffy puffy puppies.
No.
It's like, you're squatting and you're gonna steal someone's home
Mhm.
and why are you having to be here in your tent being all messy? you know? So it was really, you were constantly sort of having to justify yourself in these kind of barrages, and like your phone would be just going
Going crazy.
constantly. And you know what the media is like? They're like, of course not the Ulster Hares.
No,
I
no,
mean,
no,
we
we're
love
nice,
the
you know.
Ulster Hares. It's self-aware. Whole different ball game. But
Thank you.
when you're dealing with that kind of media, it's so incessant. It's so, and whenever a big story blows up, it's like everybody wants you in that, 12-hour period, and then it's like totally and then it's silent.
Yeah,
So it's a very crazy time it's a very crazy thing for the nervous system.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it had a real kind of, your breath is all kind of, and you're always, yeah, there's something about it that's definitely it's a bit traumatizing, to be honest with you, in many ways. So I'm glad that I don't do that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah. Speaking about the stuff you're doing now, well, or stuff that you've set up, well, how about we go on to a little bit of talking about when you came back to Omagh and started Pride here, Kat? Like, tell me a little bit about that. What was it like moving back? Coming back from Malaysia with your wife now, and had the place changed a lot from growing up?
So, when in Malaysia, they closed the borders. So if I left, I couldn't get back in.
Okay.
And my partner needed a really good reason in order to be able to leave as well. So we were
Yeah.
very lucky that the Irish ambassador wrote a very vague letter saying that she had the right to be in Ireland. And thankfully, we'd already got married, because I was like, they never make it easier
Yeah.
to be able to bring in your foreign partner, and let's get the pound on the pool table, let's get it booked. And thank goodness I did, because if I hadn't done that, she wouldn't have been able to leave Malaysia.
Yeah.
Um, and I hadn't come home in a year and a half, and we had a family tragedy. My neighbor, who played in our house all the time, took her own life, and
Okay.
she was only 11. And it was a very you know it was a very it was a very difficult time for our family, and I really felt like I needed to be at home. And my sister had just moved home like a couple of days previous to Shania's death, and had a young baby. And it was a really devastating time, and I needed to be with my family. So I decided to come back, and I didn't know how long it would be for. Like, I very much left my life like set up still in Malaysia. Um and like, we elected a committee for the space, and we had the funding, and we set up a company with some other people, and that was all there, still going. So that was something that was really important to me, that like all those years of work and community that we had built, that it wouldn't just all like fall apart just because we weren't there. And then I was back, I was home, and I was waiting for my partner to join me. She hadn't come yet. And it was difficult, like, because I'd spent so long away, and a lot of people who maybe I know from school or whatever, like, aren't in Omagh anymore. But the interesting thing about that time was that, like, there was a lot of people who were back, who were never back. And a lot of people in their, late 30s who didn't have any kids and who were like around, and I was talking with, and I still really vividly remember being down the burn, which is a really important place for me, the Killyclogher burn, and being on the phone with Lorraine and her saying, why don't we organize some kind of queer cabaret type thing? And I was like, well, why don't we organize a Pride? Like, everyone knows what Pride is. It's outdoors, thinking about all
Yeah.
these COVID restriction stuff. Um, Everybody kind of needs something. It was 2021. Um, I think it was May 2021. So it was like, June, sort of Global Pride Month. So it was like,
Yeah.
okay, this seems like, why don't we do that? And like, next thing we had an article in the Ulster Herald, and we had we organized a Zoom meeting, and like 40 people turned up to the Zoom meeting. And I think that was the thing about it too, because we had people joining us from London, people from all over who came in on the Zoom, and also political parties, organize, like, or people like the Rainbow Project, LGBT organizations as well come in on the Zoom in a way that they might not have if it had have been a physical meeting in Omagh.
Yeah.
So I think in a funny way, the the constraints of the time made it sort of possible. Um, and it was sort of one of those things where, people did have kind of spare time, and maybe even a bit of they weren't going to weddings, they weren't they weren't going to concerts. So maybe they also had a bit of spare money as well. So it was all done on, donations. We just set up the crowdfunder, and I remember we did that first event, and I just had everybody's money in envelopes. you
Eh,
know,
the, the
cash in
thing I
hand for the stage, and
yeah that
all
was that
that
was
kind of thing.
that was the thing. I just moved to Omagh when the first Pride had happened, and I can remember coming down and thinking, well, this is because I've been to a couple before, like rural prides, and this was by far and away the sort of straight away it was the big stage and the big thing. And how did you manage to come about with that so quickly and just straight after COVID, like, and everything was there?
Yeah, and it was still very COVID-y. We had loads of
Yeah,
COVID tests and all, and we had to
yeah,
think about all that stuff. Like, we had all these COVID tests, and why the reason why um we had it in the car park of the college,
yes,
the tech, because we didn't want it to sort of be associated necessarily with like a bar or whatever.
yeah.
And then also because it sort of gave us an opportunity to kind of control crowd and everything if we needed to, so that we were
I
trying to
remember
think
having to do
about.
my test before coming in.
There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
So we really
yeah,
we were trying to do whatever we could for people to not say like, oh, this is so irresponsible. How
yeah.
dare you? And I kind of was cognizant of that from having organized events during COVID back in Malaysia.
Mhm.
Um, and then, I mean, I think also because I'd had that experience, like, I'd been organizing events like when I was 11 in
Yeah,
the Blue Peter Bring and Buy sale in Oma Library,
yeah, yeah,
or the Halloween party in my garage,
yeah,
or the party in the quarry, like we used to. And then way back, in at uni, and in London, and then in Malaysia. So I kind of had like a toolbox,
mhm.
of how to do it. Like, here's my Google form, and here's the spreadsheet, and this is how we roll, and I
Yeah.
could just sort of roll it out again. And then we also had a lot of great talent in the town. I mean, Shane Pritchard stepped up, and he'd been really involved with Omagh Carnival as it
Yeah,
was back in the day. Like, my sister was going through the archives,
yeah,
of the papers from the 80s.
yeah,
And it used to be that, like, the different parks, would
mhm.
have like a kind of fate. They would sort of have like
Yeah.
events, and there would
Mhm.
be a carnival in Omagh.
Okay.
And that all really fell away. But, Shane remembered doing that. So even just things like putting up the bunting, or like, having the ladders, and he also had like a whole kit bag in his garage,
Yeah.
of materials to put up, and bunting and all this kind of thing. And so that was all good. And I mean, even with the big stage, like they hadn't done any events, so he gave me a real knockdown price. Like, you know, it
Yeah.
was about a third of what it cost. Like, we don't have the big stage now because it got too expensive,
Yeah.
like he just gave me like a sort of cash in hand sort of a price for it, because he
Look, we've
was
had a
just
really rough
happy to
cove.
he was
We've had a
just
really,
happy to dust it off, and
yeah,
get the lads, like, get the mothballs off, and
yeah,
see does everything still work, after it not moving for a year, a
yeah.
year and a half. So it was all and it was all, just done with a lot of love and a lot of sweat equity and all that, and even on the day, somebody gave us like $1,000, someone just donated £1,000, one
Wow.
person, we don't even know who it was, on the day. Just, we live streamed it and everything as well, which I think was really important. We had people tuning in from all over the world who were like, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe this is happening in Omagh, and people, I mean, I'm just getting goosebumps now, just talking about it, like, because it
Mhm.
really was so transformative for people. And I think especially after all the trauma and the upheaval and the change that people have gone through collectively with COVID, it was something really exuberant and joyous, and that just really brought people together, so yeah, it was a beautiful thing. And I think that's the thing, like, everything that happens before always leads up to where you are now, and nothing is wasted, and it all feeds in.
So was this the fifth year of Omagh Pride this year, wasn't it? Cat,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
so it was the fifth parade,
Uh-huh.
but it's kind of the fourth year, if you get what
Yeah,
I'm saying, in a
yeah,
confusing way, because that was sort of May, June 2021, and then we delivered the parade in September.
yeah.
And then and it, like, there's always a drama, then we had 2022, the Queen died,
I remember the Queen died. You had to move
that's
the
when we
venue the
moved
night before.
to
Was it the night before?
we were
Yeah.
literally setting up at the college when we got the call to say, so the college said, no, we're not gonna go ahead. And then I was like, call Mickey McElroy.
And get it. Let's
So,
get
and
this sorted.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
because you know what? By that point, then we'd got some funding, and we were like, we have put so much energy, we put so much effort into this. Like, the town still deserves this. Like, you're not going to just put it on another time. Businesses had spent money, and we were like, well, the show must go on. And it's funny because, I always say, you always get what you want, just not the way you wanted it. Because I always wanted it in that car park.
Okay. Right in the middle of the town, I suppose, you know?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wanted that vibe of being in
Yeah.
the middle of the town, and of it being, not that wee bit removed or that wee bit separate. Like, I wanted it to feel like, yeah, we're filling up the town.
And that's the thing, like it's literally thousands of people have taken part in it now. And like, how does it feel? You know, when you're up the top near the courthouse and you look down, it's always an amazing sight seeing the amount of people there. What does it feel every year now, knowing that you helped start that, and when you're look down there and just seeing all them people, how does that feel?
Been really privileged. I feel lucky that, I feel grateful that, it was sort of, I think it was right place, right time, right people. You don't do anything on your own. I think that's really important to remember. And I feel really proud of the team that have kept it going. Like, I very much step back the last couple of years, and I think that's really important too, because whenever you are somebody who sets something up, people are always going to be looking at you for permission. So there's something really essential about stepping back from something to allow others to step in. So it's so beautiful. I'm just, I look at it and think, oh, this is great. It's wonderful to just know that something happens without you. That's a really beautiful part of it. And like, I'm so proud of the team and the committee, and how, people have stepped up to organize it. And, I really hope that new people again will step up this year. We've got some people who've been involved from the start, like Daniel Waldron and Lorraine, who are going to take a step back this year. It's their turn to rest. So I'm really excited for new people who'll step up as well. And so I think that's really key to anything that you organize, is that you're always planning for succession, and you're always ensuring that it can happen without you, and it doesn't become about you. It has to be much bigger than an individual. Of course, I'm happy to do this, the chatty stuff, and talk away and do that, and help out, like, as and when I'm needed. But it's important to leave space for others.
Because you're still involved with a lot of the Pride stuff, even though you're saying take a step back. Like I know you did the leggy stuff this year as well that was associated with Pride. Tell me a little bit about that, Pride. Kat, I know you've been looking into a lot of that with local history and stuff.
Yeah, so that's the thing about, like, I'm the kind of person, I love starting things. I'm a starter, and I love getting stuff going, and then stepping aside and letting other people take it over, and so because I haven't had to put so much energy into my Pride, that's allowed me to put energy into other things that I'm interested in. And then it's wonderful because then I have Oma Pride to collaborate with on that. Even if we were able to apply for some funding through Oma Pride for the rural engagement arts program through Arts Council Northern Ireland, and we did a project in Fitna. We made a short video about Raymond Brown Leckie, who was a gay man, a gender non-conforming individual, who was a female impersonator as early as 1899. He lived from 1881 till 1961. He was a philanthropist. He was an actor. He was a musician, and he put on shows. So I have a great admiration for him as a producer. Somebody who got so many people to be on a stage and to perform, and to do that at a time whenever there was no WhatsApp, and there was no Discord, there was no Zoom, and he was printing his posters down at the print shop.
Yeah.
And he had some beautiful posters, all pink and gold leaf and flowery edging, and he was a really interesting guy. And he buried his same-sex partner, in the family plot. He's very much admired and remembered and thought of fondly in Fintna. And I think as queer people, it's so often, there's like, you don't get to live, you don't get to be who you want to be. There's like some kind of tragic ending.
A lot of hidden history as well there. Nobody quite knows the truth about who was who and what they were for. I suppose with him being so open about things, that's an unusual story in Ireland. I would imagine.
Yeah, totally unusual. I mean, I think just having like a grave there of both of them. And he had like he's got this beautiful photograph of him and his partner, Joel Henry Hart. And apparently he printed this photo out, and he put it in sort of like a special kind of wallet, I guess, and he gave it to people who he worked with on like the equestrian committee, and he did the choir, and he was at church every week. Like, he was so well respected by the local Church of Ireland and all that, but yet, everybody knew that the nature of his sexuality. I mean, it wasn't talked about, obviously, and it wasn't like, oh, people were super in your face about it or whatever. I mean, and because people wouldn't, and you wouldn't do that sort of thing. And I guess I had a real affinity because I knew what it was like from being in Malaysia, and how as queer people we still manage to get together and do things and all that, despite it being illegal, and how much you still make a life, and make a life worth living in those adverse circumstances. So I went down a total Lecky rabbit hole and became completely obsessed. And then I also got to make like a augmented reality tour. So you scan a wee QR code, and you get to look through like a 3D representation of his scrapbook, which is in the Public Records Office of Northern Ireland. And I used his posters and his playbills and all that, and edited the text to tell you different things from his life. And we also reconstructed his house that would have been there in Ecclesville. And I also wrote a monologue from the point of view of his housekeeper, on the day of the auction, because everything in the house was auctioned and the money was then given to two charities that looked after the orphans of actors and elderly musicians. And all his land up in Derry actually was auctioned. And it was funny, I was talking to a woman yesterday and she was telling me she lived up in Sheriff's Mountain and her dad had bought a wee plot of land there. And I knew that that was part of Lecky's land. And I said, did he buy it in 1962? And she looked at me like I was completely crazy. She was like, how did you know that? And I was like, because that was Lecky's land, and I think even that, the fact that it didn't go to a relative, it really freed up a lot of land and that then became available. Obviously the thing was that a lot of Protestants wouldn't sell to Catholics and they held on to their land. And that meant that a lot of land in Sheriff's Mountain and Shantallow all came onto the market at one time, just when there were Catholics who were probably able to purchase that land. So I think he's really left a lasting legacy in terms of not just what he supported in his lifetime, but also the fact that Fenton now has a golf club, it has a beautiful park, it has an equestrian centre. It has all these amenities that, a big village, small town like Fenton wouldn't otherwise have if they hadn't had such a generous landlord. And I think that's something, and if he, because he did then leave it to the people as opposed to keeping it, in private hands, as would have happened if he had have had descendants, essentially. So I think there's a really interesting story there in terms of his generosity, his creativity, his artistry, being a producer, being an artist, and also it's a cross community story too. I mean, that's what people really talk about is, I think so often in Northern Ireland we get so caught up on this idea that like, oh, the Catholics and Protestants hate each other. They've always hated each other. And I'm like, it's such a load of nonsense and I'm so sick of this story. It's not true. It fits a nice little narrative, for them across the water, to say we all hate each other when and it's not true. And he was definitely very much somebody who worked very cross community, and the Eccles family were always known for that as well. And you can see that going right the way back to even the famine, that the records show that people did a lot better and they gave land for the Catholic Church as well as the land for the Church of Ireland. So I think that's really interesting too, because of course, rightly so, we hear so much about like the negative story of the landlord. Like we do the negative story of the gay, or the negative story of the artist, living in poverty and precarity. But there's something very, and of course we can't sweep that under the carpet or pretend it doesn't exist, but there's something hopeful and resilient about the story of the people who actually did make life better for others. And I think coming from a rural area too, where people would have relied so heavily upon the local landlord for the employment and also for organizing, for bringing stuff to the area, whether that was the train or the celebrity, like Raymond Brown Leckie had a concert in his house, had a theatre in his house. So they brought life to an area, he organized things in the town and all that. So if we're thinking, what does it mean to be rural now in the absence of the big house? Like what's the big house now? What's the big house of the future? Like what is the the industry? What is the magnet? What can attract people, people, life, art, and that's something I'm really passionate about and interested in, is like, how do we make a place livable? Whether that's a place where it's illegal to be gay, whether that's like being an artist in London, whether that's making, life in Northwest rural Ireland somewhere that feels like you can actually, have exist in, that you don't have to go away to be gay or go away to have a career that's meaningful or all that. I think that's sort of maybe a bit of a through line that I've
Yeah.
always had is how you create those spaces in hostile places.
Yeah. I think that might be a problem patterns lyric there.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
it is.
Creating
Yeah,
places, create
yeah.
spaces in hostile places.
I think it's something like that. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. No. No. No, Kat. I'll let you be shortly. But I'm just going to ask you about. So
Try to
what
give you
have you?
something nice and soundbitey to end on there.
Yeah. No. I'll let you. That's. I was. Tell me a little bit about what you've got coming up and what things you'd like to talk
What's
about.
next?
That way.
What's
What?
next?
Sorry.
What's next?
What's
Um,
next?
what's next? So I've just handed in my notice for my day job. So
Okay.
I'm gonna try and do the whole like freelancy job and artist thingy
Okay.
again.
Yeah.
I've sort of the last couple of years I've been working in community development in Derry and now I'm just like, okay, I wanna be able to have more freedom and make more choices and not be tied into the 9 to 5. I've been working on trying to get pregnant, so I've got my third round of IVF in
Okay.
November. So I've got some little embryos. So I'm hoping that one of those embryos will stick around long
Fingers
enough.
crossed.
So I've been working on my body, on my health, like trying to lose weight and trying to lower my cortisol, take all my anti-inflammatory diets.
Mhm.
I have endometriosis, so that makes it really difficult, and I have fibroids. So I've kind of like become, high key obsessed with whatever hacks I can find that'll make my fertility journey successful. It's something I've been working on for 5.5 years. So
Okay.
kind of difficult for me to have such a long project that I spent so much time, money, and energy on that I have not yet brought to completion. So fingers crossed for November. And I've got at the end of August, I'm performing an electric picnic.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
So come see me at
Yeah.
Electric Picnic in the Minefield stage, 5 p.m. on the Friday, just before Chapel Rowan at Hosier. So excited to see them. I've been nominated to go to a poetry festival in Greece in September.
That's brilliant.
October, I've got some funding from Poetry Ireland to put on an event in Derry called Borderlines. I'm bringing
Okay.
up a guy called Cormac McGarahalt, he's the current Irish Poetry Slam champion,
Okay.
and some other local people as well. In end of October, I'm doing a thing for Derry Halloween where I'm going to be like a sort of spiritual medium, come Zoltan, come tarot reader, who's going to evoke the spirits of the lesser known historical figures
Okay.
of of the Northwest. And then in November, as well as my putting the embryo in, I'm doing a thing with Outburst, which is a queer arts festival. And they've got this project called Brewing, where they get you to do kind of like a 10-15 minute um piece in development. So I'm working on a piece that's about my fertility journey and all that. So I'm gonna do that in November in Belfast. So yeah, I've got a bunch of stuff coming up. I've got a loads of funding applications in. So, if fingers crossed some of them will come through. Hopefully not all of them, because then I'll be really tired. But yeah, so I'm working on my debut collection. I've got a manuscript of about 100 poems or so. So I've been submitting them to journals. I've had quite a few of them published in journals, which is great. I'm submitting kind of extracts to like different like chapbook competitions, like pamphlet competitions, because that seems to be the kind of path to get published, is if you can get a kind of 25 pager published, then hopefully you can get something longer published. So I'm trying to just kind of build my profile and build my work on the page so that I can hopefully get someone to
Put
you
that
know,
out.
put
Yeah.
that out in a book. Then I'll be talking to you again, Thomas. I'll be like,
I have a
I've
book
got
to
a
I have
book
a
to
book to
promote.
promote. Come on. No, well, Kat, thank you very much for chatting to me. It's always good fun. So
Cool.
it
I hope
is.
it's fun.
So,
Oh yes, and I'm hosting a comedy night
all
for
right, okay.
County Pride.
Oh, very
I think
nice.
it's soon. As part of Chicken Box
Oh,
Comedy, which is
cool.
a night run by an Omagh man,
Yeah.
Rory McSwigan, another gay Omagh person. Runs that in Bennigan's 3 times a month. So there's like a foil Pride special, which I'm hosting. So I also like doing a little bit of comedy. So I might, now that I don't have to wake up and go to the office at 9 a.m., I might have some time to work on the comedy stuff.